Picture this. It's the 14th century and you're knee-deep in medieval Europe, where a single glance could spark a lifelong romance, a deadly duel, or God forbid a lawsuit so messy it drags on for 3 generations and somehow involves a pair of very opinionated goats. Welcome to tonight's absurd adventure, so grab a seat, preferably not the one next to the unwashed peasant dim the candles, and let the evening breeze smelling faintly of regret and overcooked turnips carry you into the wild world of medieval romance. In our modern era, we're told eye contact is the key to connection, a soulful gaze worth more than 1,000 TikTok likes. But back then, locking eyes wasn't a vibe check. It was a high-stakes gamble that could end in wedding bells, a sword fight, or an awkward chat with her dad about why you're suspiciously eyeing his prize cow. In a world where the air is thick with beeswax fumes, horse manure, and the vague threat of plague, every look was a calculated risk, more nerve-wracking than filing taxes with a quill pen. Courtly love manuals, because yes, even in the Dark Ages, people needed a 200-page PDF on how not to screw up. Flirting demanded men gaze gently but with purpose. Sounds poetic, right? Except it's the kind of vague advice that feels like it was scribbled by a monk who once saw a woman from 50 yards away and immediately fainted. Your gaze had to scream, "I admire your tapestry skills and your ability to dodge dysentery," while avoiding the vibe of, "I'm here to swipe your chickens and burn down your uncle's shady monastery side hustle." Get it wrong and you're in deep trouble. Glance too quickly and you're either rude dead or suffering from medieval neck spasms, a real condition probably. Stare too long and congratulations, you've just proposed, challenged her dad to a joust, or accidentally put the family mule into a trance. Romantic. Sure, if your idea of romance is signing a betrothal contract while sweating through your tunic. Practical. About as practical as using a catapult to deliver love letters. One particularly unhinged guidebook, penned by a guy who clearly never left his mom's basement or whatever the medieval equivalent was, warned against lingering looks that make her blush. Great advice, except blushing could be triggered by literally anything: a stiff breeze, too much mead, the embarrassment of tripping over a pig, or the creeping realization you've been flirting with a hay bale for 20 minutes. If her cheeks went red, protocol demanded you avert your eyes, cross yourself like you're warding off demons, and maybe sprint to the next county. Some poor saps took this so seriously they developed gaze whiplash, a condition that left them dizzy, single, and with a permanent crick in their neck. The church bells toll in the distance, a not-so-subtle reminder that God's got a front-row seat, and he's definitely judging your eye game. The church wasn't exactly thrilled about all this ogling priests thought too much staring led to sinful thoughts, gout, or at least an hour-long confession where you'd have to explain why you were making hard eyes at a nun during Vespers. They insisted love should come from pious admiration, which basically meant staring at the floor and muttering about crop yields or how rainy it's been since 1342. Lock eyes during Mass. You might as well have moonwalked through the cathedral waving stolen relics. That's a scandal so juicy it'd be the talk of the village for decades. Mothers, meanwhile, were out here whispering to their daughters about the perils of rogue glances, their warnings mingling with the scent of lavender incense and the general medieval funk of, "We haven't invented soap yet." For noblewomen, eye contact was a minefield. They were trained to perfect the courtly stare, a blank, icy look that said, "I'm as excited about this as I am about watching mold grow on bread." One wrong glance and you're accused of flirting witchcraft, or worst of all, having thoughts about the king's tax policies. Every morning, these women woke up in drafty castles that smelled like roses mildew, and whatever the chamber pot was up to, knowing a stray look out the window could be misread as a secret signal to Viking raiders, a torrid affair, or an unhealthy obsession with pigeons. But love being the chaotic gremlin, it is always found a way, usually the most ridiculous way possible. Despite all the rules, people still managed to swap smoldering looks across grimy castle halls that reeked of overcooked mutton and bad life choices. They flirted through crowded markets, where the soundtrack was screaming babies, clucking hens, and some guy yelling about turnip prices. Poets swooned over stolen glances briefer than a heartbeat, which, let's be real, was probably just someone blinking in slow motion. Troubadours belted out songs about eyes that stabbed the soul, which was honestly a better fate than getting stabbed by an actual dagger, a common Tuesday activity. In villages where everyone knew your business, your cousin's business, and your goat's business, eye contact turned into a game more intricate than a 3D chess match. Some couples got so good at it, they developed a secret code: 1 wink for meet me by the haystack, 2 winks for my dad's polishing his battle axe, 3 winks for we should run away together or more likely help. I've got something in my eye. There's even a legend about Goodman Benedict the baker and Mistress Cordelia, who courted for 6 months by staring at each other through their windows. She'd leave a daisy on her sill to say, "Let's hang out." He'd arrange his bread loaves into cryptic shapes to say, "I'm into you." It was all very romantic until Cordelia's grandma ate the signal loaf, sparking a village-wide drama involving a priest, 3 gossipy aunties, and a chicken who was just there for the vibes. So, as the medieval moon rises and the scent of turnips lingers like a bad decision, let's raise a goblet to those brave souls who dared to lock eyes in a world where a glance could mean love war or a very awkward conversation about livestock. They proved that even in the muck and madness of the Middle Ages, the heart and the eye always finds a way to make things hilariously complicated. Step into the chaotic circus of a medieval castle feast where the air's heavy with the scent of suspiciously green roast boar, flickering candlelight, and the faint threat of a food fight breaking out over the last decent trencher. Here, the rules of gazing shift faster than a knight dodging a lance, and one wrong look could land you in a duel with someone whose family owns more pointy weapons than you've got teeth. Sneak a glance at a lady sipping her wine. Maybe okay, as long as her husband isn't the type who collects thumbscrews for fun. Stare while she's gnawing on a chicken leg. Rude mostly because medieval table manners looked like a barnyard brawl with worse hygiene. Take Sir Aldrich, the unfortunately named a knight, whose real name was somehow more cursed than a haunted crypt. At a marathon 8-course feast, he locked eyes with Lady Evangeline of Brightwater like he was trying to solve a math problem carved in stone. When pressed for an explanation, he deadpanned that he was counting the peas on her plate to ensure her nutritional wellness. Spoiler, they didn't wed. She ran off with his cousin, who at least didn't treat dinner like a vegetable census. When night fell, the world turned into a shadowy maze of creaky floors, weird noises, and things that definitely went thunk in the dark. Gazing rules loosened up mostly because nobody could see well enough to know if you were mooning at your crush a chair or the castle's resident cow. It was the prime time for sneaky romance, assuming you could find your beloved without tripping over a sleeping dog or mistaking a tapestry for your soulmate. For the fancy folks in their stupidly expensive manor houses, where tapestries cost more than your entire village, gazing was less about love and more about starting a geopolitical dumpster fire. One flirty look from a duke's daughter to the wrong guy could trigger a land war, a contested will, or at least a dinner where everyone's passive-aggressively complimenting the wine while plotting murder. Enter the gaze interpreters, a squad of nosy old ladies who could spot the difference between a hi there glance and a I'm gonna steal your livestock stare. These women were basically human lie detectors, decoding looks with the precision of a monk copying scripture. Then there's Lady Cordelia of Westmarch, either a flirting mastermind or a complete lunatic who turned fan waving into a secret code for her gazes. Fan over the left eye. Let's chat. Right eye. Dad's got his stabby knife out. Closed fan under the chin. Meet me in the rose garden at midnight, but heads up, the gardener's been muttering about curses. It was like medieval texting, but with more feathers and mortal peril. Seasons added their own flavor of nonsense. Spring gazing was all hope and hay fever, with everyone sneezing through their romantic stares. Summer was steamy and risky. Blushing could be blamed on the heat until someone passed out and needed the local barber surgeon dentist vet to sort them out. Autumn gazing was moody, matching the vibe of wilting harvests and existential dread. Winter good luck, everyone was wrapped in so many layers they looked like ambulatory haystacks, and identifying your crush was like excavating a relic. Musicians, the unsung wingmen of the Middle Ages, played tunes to set the mood. A slow, depressing ballad about death or taxes gave you cover to stare soulfully, claiming you were just moved by the art. Upbeat dance music. No chance for lingering looks. You're too busy trying not to trip over your own cloak. Churches, never ones to miss a chance to overcomplicate things, had their own gaze rulebook. Stare at the altar. Pious. At the priest. Fine, unless he's the sketchy one everyone gossips about. At the stained glass. Deep thoughts. At the cutie 3 pews over. Better carve out a week for confession, complete with a PowerPoint, on why you're headed for the fiery pit. Traveling was a romantic minefield thanks to regional quirks. In northern France, you could flirt at harvest festivals, but only while clutching wheat and dressed like a Puritan scarecrow. Italian city-states had guild laws for gazing, probably written by someone allergic to joy. German lands demanded written permission for any stare longer than 3 seconds, spawning a bureaucracy of grumpy timekeepers with hourglasses and zero chill. The paperwork alone was enough to kill the mood. Tournaments were the Super Bowl of gazing drama. Ladies in the stands could toss encouraging looks at their favorite knights, but they had to ration them like wartime bread to avoid whispers of bias, treason, or insufficient bloodlust. One overly intense stare, and by sundown you're betrothed to some land-rich dullard who thinks romance is a type of siege weapon. When gazing went wrong, it went epically wrong. Sir Edmund the Persistent stared so hard at Lady Margaret during a Christmas feast that she face-planted into her figgy pudding, creating a dessert disaster historians called a fruity fiasco. Lord Baldwin of Ashwick racked up 3 duels in a month for his wandering eye, turning his social calendar into a fight club. Worst of all was Thomas the Dreamer, a merchant's kid, whose gazing skills were so potent he accidentally charmed half his village's women. The fallout, dubbed the Great Gazing War of 1347, featured feuding families, trampled gardens, baffled cows, and a goat named Bernard, who somehow became the town's unofficial mediator. It raged for 6 months until Thomas, overwhelmed by love, and Bernard's side-eye fled to a monastery where eye contact was basically a sin. If dodging the medieval gaze police wasn't hard enough, love-struck fools of the Middle Ages had an even stinkier problem: how to smell like a dream when deodorant was as fictional as a dragon with a day job. Your only weapons: sheer desperation, a fistful of herbs, and the faint hope of a gusty breeze to carry away the evidence of your last bath, circa last harvest. Welcome to the aromatic thunderdome of medieval romance, where the air was a pungent stew of livestock, unwashed tunics, and a collective misunderstanding of soap's purpose. In this whiffy world, herbs were the MVP of both hygiene and heart-winning, which was wildly optimistic for a society that thought shower meant standing in the rain. Want to woo your crush? Forget Chanel. Number 5 cologne wasn't a thing, and groping around in the dark for anything was a gamble that could end in a face full of turnips. Instead, you raided the garden, hit up the local apothecary, or in a pinch rummaged through last night's stew for something fragrant. Guys were advised to stuff rosemary, sage, or lavender into their sleeves and boots, hoping to waft past a lady like a walking potpourri. The idea was to leave a cloud of herbal charm in your wake, masking the bouquet of sweat, horse, and whatever mystery muck you'd trekked through. Did it work? About as well as using a leaf to hide an ogre, but it screamed, "I'm trying." Which, in a world where still alive was a personality trait, was basically foreplay. Enter Sir Roderick the overly optimistic. His real name was Worse, like a sneeze crossed with a tax form, who spent his mornings cramming herbs into his outfit like he was prepping for a vegetarian siege. He'd strut through the market, trailing a scent like a spice cart crash. Dogs loved it, following him like he was the Pied Piper of parsley. The ladies? They were torn between, "Oh, he's trying," and "Why does he smell like my grandma's soup?" If you had coin, you could flex with a pomander, a fancy herb-stuffed orb dangling from your belt like a medieval air freshener. It swung as you walked, broadcasting, "I might bathe someday" with every step. The fanciest ones looked like clove-crusted disco balls, dazzling onlookers with your wealth and questionable priorities. Meanwhile, Women tucked scented sachets into their corsets and sleeves, doubling as perfume and flea repellent, because nothing ruins a flirty moment like clawing at your armpit mid-sonnet. These pouches brimmed with lavender roses or spices that had seen more of the world than the average peasant ever would. Some love manuals got weird with it suggesting you rub herbs directly on your skin. Basil for swagger, because someone somewhere decided smelling like pesto was sexy. Mint for that fresh vibe, except medieval mint was probably strong enough to strip paint. Marjoram for charm, because nothing says marry me like smelling like a walking lasagna. One 13th century guide claimed rubbing thyme on your chest would reveal your heart. Poetic, sure. Practical. Only if your goal was to look like you'd lost a fight with a salad. Knowing medieval folks, someone definitely tried it and ended up in a healer's hut, muttering about time-induced visions. Not all smells were created equal, and the medieval sniff hierarchy was more intricate than a king's family tree. Garlic screamed, "I'm alive," and eating great for survival, less great for snuggling. Too much, and you'd be exiled to the turnip cellar of social rejection. Moderation was key, but subtlety wasn't exactly medieval forte. Breath reeking of ale and pickled herring. Just Another Tuesday romance standards were low enough to limbo under a snake's belly. The rich splurged on rosewater, pricier than a village's annual budget dabbed on wrists like liquid gold. Sandalwood costing more than your average castle was saved for big days like Easter or trying to bag a royal. Saffron. That was straight up flexing. Wearing it was like spraying your entire dowry out of a perfume bottle. The poor meanwhile scraped by with wild mint if they were lucky. Pine needles if they liked smelling like a forest brawl, or revolutionary thought soap, which was basically medieval rocket science. Herb mania birthed a whole industry. Apothecaries peddled love salves, glorified lawn clippings, mashed with old oil promising to make you irresistible. Results ranged from mildly pleasant to, why is my face red and why are cats following me? Take Goodman Harold the overzealous, who slathered on so much basil oil to court Mistress Eleanor that he attracted a flock of herb-crazed sparrows. His love life tanked, but he pivoted to a side hustle leading birdwatching tours. So, silver lining, seasons threw more curveballs. Spring herbs were peak potency, bursting with post-winter hope and pollen. Summer herbs drowned in the general stench of heat flies and medieval BO. Autumn herbs had a wise but wilted vibe, like your romance was already on its last legs. Winter herbs dried and rare crunched underfoot, turning every date into a spice rack symphony. Traveling was a scent-based minefield. Northerners leaned into pine and evergreen because forests smelled better than cities. Southerners rocked florals that didn't keel over in the heat. Cross a border and your irresistible lavender could be someone else's. Are you possessed stench? One wrong whiff and you're not just single, you're dodging pitchforks for smelling like a heretic. So as we wade through the fragrant fog of medieval romance, let's salute the brave souls who battled body odor with nothing but herbs hustle and a prayer. In a world where smelling not awful was a love language, they proved that even in the stinkiest of times, the heart and the nose could still chase the dream, even if it smelled suspiciously like soup. Down in the sun-soaked Mediterranean, where herbs and spices grew like medieval party favors, romantics took smelling good to a level so extra it needed a user manual thicker than a monk's prayer book. These scent recipes, still kicking around in dusty archives, read like potions for a wizard who got drunk and forgot what magic meant. Think 3 pinches of saffron, a sprig of rosemary, and the tears of a lovesick goat. Buckle up for the fragrant fiasco of medieval Mediterranean courtship, where love smelled like a spice bazaar and a whole lot of ambition. In Italy, your scent was your social resume, shouting your status louder than a herald with a megaphone. Nobles drenched themselves in imported perfumes so pricey they could have bought a village wafting across courtyards like human trust funds. Merchants flexed their trade routes with exotic whiffs of far-off lands, each sniff telling tales of silk roads and shady deals. Craftsmen. They just smelled like their jobs, bakers gave off cozy bread vibes, honestly, a total win in the romance game. Tanners, though. Their leather reek was a love repellent so strong it could clear a banquet hall. Good luck, pal. The French, because of course they did, turned herbal scents into a cryptic art form that made Da Vinci's notebooks look like a grocery list. They cooked up scent codes where every combo was a secret handshake. Lavender plus rose. I like you, but like chastely. Sage and mint. I'm ready to put a ring on it, or at least a really nice turnip. Garlic with anything. You'd waved the white flag on romance, and were just trying to survive another winter without scurvy. Decoding these was like cracking a spy's cipher, except the prize was a date instead of state secrets. Big social events were basically ScentCon with prep rituals that made modern spa days look lazy. Ladies spent hours stewing in herbal baths, soaking in flower and herb-infused water that sounded lovely, until you realized it was reused so much it was basically communal bacteria bisque. Supposedly great for the skin, it probably just gave everyone the same weird rash. Gentlemen, meanwhile, went for quick and dirty fixes, mashing herbs with oil or fat into a goop they'd slather on their face, hands, and hair. The results? Either you smelled like a charming forest sprite, or like you'd lost a wrestling match with a compost heap. No in-between. The real heart melter, though, was the gift game. Lovers swapped herbal bouquets, think less cute flower basket, and more encrypted plant manifesto. Every leaf and petal was picked for its vibe and smell like sending a love letter. Only your crush could read, assuming they'd read the same 12th century herb encyclopedia. Get it wrong, and your I'm smitten bouquet might scream, I think you're a weed. These weren't just gifts. They were high-stakes floral PowerPoints. Preserving these bouquets was its own saga. Flowers were dried into sachets, cherished for months, until they crumbled into fragrant dust or got eaten by a curious rat. Some couples carried on entire romances through escalating herb arrangements, a slow-burn flirtation via basil and lavender that was basically medieval texting, but with more bugs. One wrong sprig and you're confessing your love to someone who thinks you sent them a grocery list. If navigating medieval eye contact and AAU to herb wasn't tricky enough, the real gauntlet for any wannabe Romeo was poetry, the kind that had to woo your crush, dodge the church's stink eye, and not get you excommunicated faster than you could say, heretic. This wasn't just scribbling sweet nothings. It was crafting coded love letters in Latin, with God as your editor, and the local priest ready to yeet you into eternal timeout for one misplaced metaphor. Welcome to the high-stakes word play of medieval romance, where every verse was a tightrope walk over a pit of holy wrath. Poetry wasn't just for dreamy weirdos or lords with too many quills. It was a survival skill, especially for nobles whose charm was as rusty as their armor. But here's the kicker, you couldn't just gush about your beloved's smile or brains. That was too direct, too human, and probably a one-way ticket to a sermon on lust. Instead, you had to liken her to the Virgin Mary, because nothing screams let's date, like you're basically Jesus' mom. Scholars call this religious romantic confusion, but back then it was just Tuesday's to-do list. Imagine Sir Galahad the Quill Cursed. His real name was probably a tongue twister that sounded like a sneeze hunched in his leaky castle, surrounded by candles reeking of mutton fat, scratching out a poem while rain threatens to turn his room into an indoor moat. He dips his fancy ink costing more than a peasant's yearly stew budget, and writes, O lady, thy glow outshines the holiest shrine. It's swoon-worthy until you realize he's comparing his crush to a church altar. Peak romance, medieval style. Courtly love poems had to be holier than a saint's laundry day to keep the church from clutching its pearls. The result? Verses that tiptoed between I'm smitten and I'm ready for Vespers, often landing in a weird zone of, is this a love note or a monastery application? One famous poem called The Beloved, My Chaste Delight's Angel, which is basically saying you're hot, but in a way that won't get me burned at the stake. Romantic. Sure if your standards are lower than a dungeon floor. This holy wordplay caused chaos. Suitors sent poems praising their lady's saintly vibes and Madonna. Tear face, leaving her wondering if she was being courted or scouted for a nunnery. Some women fed up with the mixed signals just joined convents to avoid the paperwork. To make things weirder, many nobles outsourced their poems to troubadours, medieval ghostwriters who churned out verses romantic enough to charm, pious enough to dodge scandal, and vague enough to deny in court if the vibe went south. These troubadours were lyrical ninjas crafting lines about heavenly grace and divine cheekbones, without hinting at anything as scandalous as, say, wanting to hold hands. Picture one in a smoky, great hall, belting out, "O maiden, thy virtues a beacon divine, thy soul's like a star in the heavens that shine." The crowd nods like it's a sermon, while the lady squints, trying to figure out if this means meet me by the well or please consider a vow of celibacy. It was poetry so filtered through church dogma that the romance sometimes got lost in translation. But the ladies weren't just sitting there decoding this nonsense. They fired back with their own poems, and theirs were gloriously practical. While guys droned on about angelic vibes, women wrote stuff like, "Your sword arm's nice, your manners are cool, and that herd of cows you own." Very sexy. Straight to the point, with a side of, "I've done the math on your estate." These gals knew what was up. Seasons spiced up the poetic madness. Spring poems leaned into rebirth, churning out love notes that sounded like theology essays with a cameo by daisies. Summer verses waxed poetic about God's bounty, reading like crop reports with a halo. Autumn got moody, musing on death and fading beauty, either deep or a total buzzkill depending on your mood. Winter poems pushed spiritual warmth, producing love lines that felt like ads for divine central heating. Regions added their own flavors of poetic lunacy. French troubadours nailed the passionate yet pious vibe, but their poems were so dense you needed a theology degree and a romance tutor to get the point. Italians blended earthly and divine love, leaving everyone unsure if they were invited to a date or a pilgrimage. Germans went hard comparing crushes to warrior saints, so their love poems doubled as recruitment posters for crusades. English poets somehow mixed romance, religion, and real estate, praising a lady's virtue while slipping in nice, "flock of sheep your dad's got there." The poetry peaked at big religious festivals, where bards battled in holy verse-offs, slinging lines so packed with saintly metaphors, they needed a scholar to unpack them. One Christmas banger went, "Like magi chasing stars so bright, I seek thy grace through day and night, o'er hills and vales to find thy light." It rambled on for 47 stanzas of cosmic churchy word salad, leaving listeners dazzled, confused, and possibly late for the feast. So, as we waltz through the medieval love labyrinth, let's tip our caps to the brave poets who turned sweet nothings into a theological obstacle course. In a world where saying "I like you" could land you in hot water with the bishop, they proved love could still bloom even if it sounded like a hymn, smelled like a sheep, and came with a side of divine fine print. If churning out holy love poems wasn't already a medieval minefield, the practical hurdles made it feel like juggling flaming torches while reciting scripture in a windstorm. Poets didn't just need to nail rhyme and meter, they had to swat up on theology to avoid accidentally penning a heretical sonnet that'd get them a one-way ticket to the bishop's naughty list. Some troubadours kept priests on speed dial, think medieval HR departments for romance, ready to slap a not church-approved stamp on any verse that got too frisky. Welcome to the wild world of religious romantic poetry, where love was a high-stakes word game with eternal consequences. The rockstar poets invented a secret lingo to sneak their gooey feelings past the church's fun police. They'd toss around phrases like angelic countenance code for cute face heavenly grace, aka you've got personality or divine blessing, a sneaky marry me maybe. This poetic espionage got so polished that pros could read a love poem, wink at the mushy bits, and still swear to the priest it was just a hymn. It was like writing a steamy text, but wrapping it in so much Bible speak, your grandma would frame it. But this system had more holes than a peasant's socks. Sometimes a poet's verses were so saintly that priests started quoting them in sermons, mistaking a flirty ode for a prayer. Awkward. Worse, a few poor saps wrote such convincing holy bangers they got strong-armed into monasteries swapping candlelit date nights for a lifetime of chanting and chilly dorms. One minute you're wooing Lady Beatrice, the next your brother Sadbert banned from rhyming anything but psalms. Preserving these poetic love bombs was a whole saga. Poets didn't just scribble on spare parchment, they created illuminated manuscripts so fancy they looked ready for a cathedral gift shop. Think gold leaf tiny angels and enough religious doodles to make your crush's mom swoon. These glowed-up poems became family heirlooms passed down, like Grandma's secret stew recipe, proof of both artistic swagger and we bagged a spouse without getting excommunicated. Delivery was its own circus. Some poets belted out their verses at religious festivals, sneaking flirty vibes into public performances, while everyone thought they were just really into Lent. Crafty troubadours layered their poems with double meanings, one line for the praise. Jesus Crowd, another for the Meet Me by the Haystack crew. It was like dropping a mixtape that worked as both a church anthem and a Tinder bio, depending on who was listening. Responding to these poems was a social tightrope for women. They had to acknowledge the heart eyes without looking like they'd skipped Sunday Mass. Their reply poems were often theological flexes, out-holying the original, while slipping in a coy, I see your vibe. It was like getting a flirty DM and responding with a 500-word essay on divine grace that low-key says, call me. These ladies were basically romantic scholars juggling piety and flirtation with the finesse of a knight dodging arrows. The brain power needed for this game wasn't cheap. You had to be literate, know your Bible inside out, and have the social clout to afford fancy ink. Poetry became a status flex where wooing your crush meant proving you could debate theology and look cute in a tunic. Courtships started looking like grad school seminars, with couples bonding over scripture, and maybe sneaking a handhold when the chaperone wasn't looking. Love wasn't just blind, it was book-smart and ready for a pop quiz on the Book of Job. The long-term fallout couples who kicked off their romance with holy verses kept the habit turning married life into a non-stop metaphor festival. Need to plan dinner. Cue a chat about the miracle of the loaves and fishes. Arguing over who cleans the hearth. That's a full-on theological showdown about stewardship, and what would St. Peter do? Their homes were like poetry slams with chores where even past the salt sounded like a prayer. As our medieval sweethearts huddle over their quills, scratching out verses that dance between earthly smooches and heavenly halos, you can almost smell the smoky candles, hear the parchment crinkle, and feel the panic of trying to say I love you without accidentally pledging your soul to a nunnery. Here's to the poets who turned romance into a divine word puzzle, proving that even in a world of plague and pitchforks, love could still rhyme, even if it sounded like a sermon and came with a side of existential dread. So you've nailed the art of soulful staring slathered on herbs without turning into a farmyard magnet, and penned a poem so holy it could double as a sermon. Think you're ready for medieval love? Not so fast, Romeo. The real test is turning your love letter into a scented masterpiece and picking the perfect dead critter to scream, I'm husband material. Welcome to the wild world of medieval romance, where courtship was a full-on sensory assault and a well-aimed spear, was the ultimate Tinder swipe. A love letter wasn't just words, it was a vibe, a sniff, a whole experience, assuming your crush's nose hadn't been knocked out by the plague or a rogue whiff of medieval street funk. Scented parchment was the 14th century equivalent of dousing yourself in Dior, except you're spritzing paper with the contents of your spice drawer. Cinnamon cloves, rose petals, and if you're flexing hard, a pinch of nutmeg so fancy it could bankrupt a village. These weren't just smells. They were your shot at masking the natural bouquet of ink, soggy parchment, and I haven't washed my hands since Lent. Picture Master Benedict the bookish hunched in his chilly chamber, lit by candles reeking of sheep grease, sprinkling cinnamon on his love letter like he's seasoning a pie. One wrong move, and he's sneezing so hard he blows out the candle and ruins his parchment. Medieval lovers knew the struggle. Nothing kills the mood like hacking up a lung over your own spicy stationery. These scents weren't just for show. They were a coded language fancier than a monk's riddle. Cinnamon screamed, I'm passionate, and I know a guy who knows a guy with a spice ship. Cloves whispered, "I'm loyal, though good luck if your beloved couldn't tell cloves from random brown grit." Saffron. That was the ultimate power move, saying, "I'm so rich I burn cash on smelly paper. Also check out my sweet castle." But medieval mail was no FedEx. After days in a sweaty saddlebag bouncing through rain and mud, your love note arrived smelling like horse soup, with a faint hint of, "I tried." The gesture was there, even if the delivery was a hot mess. Some romantics got extra folding dried violets, marjoram, or rosemary right into the letter for that artisanal touch. Gorgeous, sure, but these fragile missives often exploded into herbal confetti when opened. One poor sap stuffed his letter with fennel, which his crush read as either, "You're trash" or "Here's my soup recipe." Spoiler, they didn't make it to the altar. Rich folks turned scented letters into olfactory warfare. They'd soak scrolls in rosewater or musk so potent it could knock out a nun from 10 paces. Subtlety. Nah, they wanted their love to punch you in the nose. Even wax seals got the spa treatment infused with frankincense and stamped with crests that screamed, "I'm serious, and my dad owns half the county." Some nobles hired scent specialists just to handle their letter vibes. Imagine a guy whose whole job is sniffing wax and nodding sagely. But as medieval folks loved to do, some went way overboard. Letters got so spiced up they were mistaken for potion recipes or cursed scrolls. One overzealous poet's cinnamon-drenched ode drew a squad of mice mid-delivery, turning his love note into a rodent buffet and leaving the courier with a story he'd tell for years. Seasons spiced things up further. Spring letters burst with fresh petals, all new love, new me. Summer scents had to muscle past the stench of sweaty peasants and rogue livestock. Autumn went for deep harvesty vibes to cover the whiff of rotting leaves, winter. Good luck, your dried-up potpourri. Letter crumbled like a bad cookie, leaving your crush with a lapful of dust and zero romantic clarity. Now, if you really wanted to seal the deal, forget flowers or mixtapes. The medieval move was gifting a fresh-killed forest beast, ideally still steaming. Knights and lords flexed their manliness by dropping off hunting spoils like it was no big deal. Roses are cute, but a boar's head. Blood barely dry says, "I'm thinking of you while I stab things." This wasn't weird, it was peak romance, endorsed by a society that rated your husband potential by how well you could yeet a spear at a charging stag. Ladies had to grin and bear it cooing over their 5th deer skull of the month, while mentally rearranging their already packed dead animal storage closet. Their homes started looking like creepy taxidermy galleries, all in the name of love. Some gifts came with extra meaning, a swan for grace, unless it bit someone, which swans love to do, or a falcon for, "I'm fancy and can afford birds that might eat my hand." Decoding these took a PhD in medieval vibes, plus a strong stomach. So, as our medieval lovers dust their letters with spice and haul in another carcass, let's salute their hustle. In a world where romance meant risking a sneeze storm or wrestling a boar, they proved love could conquer all. Even if it smelled like a spice rack, looked like a crime scene, and came with a side of hope. You like venison. If you're a medieval suitor too broke to sling boarheads like a knightly sugar daddy. Don't worry, you could still woo with smaller critters, though it took some serious flair to make a dead hedgehog scream, "Marry me." The less flush romantics dealt in rabbits, ferrets, and other pint-sized prey, turning love into a budget-friendly safari. But presentation was everything. One lovesick baker thought a live duck would charm a miller's daughter, until it made a break for the family, turn their water supply into duck-flavored disaster and their romance into a soggy footnote. Love, 0, plumbing, 1. For the big spenders, nothing topped the ceremonial deer presentation. A romantic flex so extra, it was basically medieval dinner theater. Picture a knight rolling up to a banquet throne, just to show off his crush, lugging a whole roasted deer like it's no big deal. Musicians strum, he spouts flowery speeches, and 50 guests pretend this isn't the most awkward potluck ever. It was less "I love you" and more "I love you" also. Check out my catering budget. Pulling it off meant juggling chef's fire pits and enough charisma to keep the vibe from tanking. Success. You're the talk of the town, your ladies swooning and your social stocks through the roof. Botch it, enjoy the public shame, and a side of food poisoning for your VIPs. This whole dead animal eat true love deal hinged on your beloved being cool with gore-soaked gifts. If she was veggie queasy or just not into waking up to a carcass on her doorstep, your grand gesture could crash harder than a jouster's ego. Some couples didn't split over bad vibes or family feuds, but because one thought a bloody stag was peak romance while the other was speed dialing the local healer for smelling salts, traveling made things trickier, as hunting gifts were a cultural minefield. Up north, you'd better bag something huge and scary, think bear or boar, to prove you're brave enough to snuggle. Southerners sniffed at that, preferring dainty prey like pheasants to show off their classy aim. Coastal folks got weird gifting fish seabirds, or on truly bizarre days, a seal that looked as confused as the recipient. Gift the wrong thing in the wrong place, and you're not just single. You're the guy who accidentally insulted a duke with a flounder. Turning a fresh kill into a swoon-worthy gift was no joke. It took pros to make a gutted rabbit look less crime scene and more court me. Enter the medieval romance caterers, experts in dressing up carcasses to dazzle, not disgust. They'd gut garnish and arrange your prize so it screamed, "I'm a provider," instead of, "I forgot what hygiene is." These folks were the unsung heroes of love, keeping your dead ferret from becoming a deal-breaker. As the last hunting horns fade and the final scented letters dry in chambers reeking of spice and Sir Roderick's latest misadventure, R.I.P. that romantic rabbit, let's toast the medieval lovers who turned courtship into a wild mix of blood guts and nutmeg-dusted dreams. In a world where romance meant dodging food poisoning and deciphering whether a seal was a proposal or a prank, they proved love could thrive even if it smelled like a spice rack, looked like a butcher shop, and came with a side of hope. You're not vegan, so you're a medieval suitor who can't hunt to save your life. Mistaking boars for grumpy pigs, and your scented letters keep pulling in squirrels instead of soulmates. Don't panic. The Middle Ages had a backup plan for the romantically inept wax poetic about her shoes, and let the stars decide when to pop the big question. Because nothing says, "I'm your forever guy," like raving about footwear and checking the moon's mood swings. Buckle up for the absurd art of medieval courtship, where love was a dance of cobbler worship and cosmic scheduling. Flattery in the Middle Ages was a social death trap. One wrong word, and you're dodging pitchforks or a priest's glare. Calling a lady beautiful. Too spicy, you heathen. Her lips, Scandal City, prepare for a public shaming. Her hair, risky, especially since it's buried under a wimple 3 veils and what they called holy headgear, but was basically a fabric fortress. So what's a safe bet? Her shoes. Yup, in a world where love could land you in confession for a decade, complimenting a gal's kicks was the ultimate smooth move, charming chaste, and keeps your eyes glued to the dirt where they belong. Imagine Master Edmund the overly careful, fresh from Sunday Mass incense, swirling like God's own air freshener. Church bells clanging and cobblestones still soggy from dawn's drizzle. He spots fair Mistress Cordelia, and with the courage of a knight facing a dragon, or at least a cranky goose, declares, "Noble lady, thy shoes are exquisitely wrought, perfect for traversing mud and mystery alike." Swoon. It's not just awkward, it's medieval games spitting bars about footwear while dodging eternal damnation. Shoes weren't just foot armor against the medieval street stew of muck and misery. They were status flexes, fashion statements, and sometimes physics-defying feats. Enter poulaines, the pointy-toed monstrosities so long they had to be tied to your knees to avoid yeeting yourself into a moat or skewering the vicar. If a lady could strut in these foot swords without face-planting into a pig trough, she was basically a superhero, and you'd be a fool not to stan her balance game. Complimenting her shoes said, "I respect your vibe, your cobbler, and the fact that you haven't tripped into a scandal." A 13th century etiquette guide, think medieval Cosmo, but with more guilt advised. Greet a lady by praising her garb or gait, but keep thy gaze below the ankle, lest ye court disgrace and her dad's battle axe. It was romantic dodgeball aiming for compliments so bland yet strategic they'd keep you in the game without sparking a village riot. Women could play two dropping lines about a guy's boots, especially if they were fancy Florentine leather or didn't reek of barnyard. Good boots screamed, "I've got coin connections, and I maybe washed my feet this month." These shoe odes were secret code. Saying nice poulains was medieval for, "I see you. I dig your style. Please catch my drift before my parents betroth me to Sir Smells Like Goats." If she fired back with a nod or jackpot a quip about your boots, you were basically engaged. One chronicle records a couple sealing the deal with, "Thy shoes are sturdy and fine. Thy boots seem fit for epic quests." Boom, 2 months later, they're wed with a dowry of goats, a vineyard, and a spare pair of loafers. This shoe obsession turned romance into a foot fetish for the ages. Kids blew their savings on fancy footwear, knowing their love life hinged on their sole game. Cobblers became accidental cupids crafting boots that could make or break a marriage. Entire family budgets got rerouted to the shoe fund because nothing tanked your prospects like showing up in last season's clogs. But even with killer kicks and a PhD in shoe sweet talk, timing was everything. And no, we're not talking wait for her to laugh at your joke. Medieval love manuals. Yep, they covered everything. Insisted you check the stars before bearing your soul. Forget vibes. You needed the moon's permission, and a heads up that Mercury wasn't throwing a cosmic tantrum. A waxing moon, when it's bulking up like a celestial gym bro, was prime time for bold moves. The logic lunar gains would juice your romantic odds, as if the moon was your wingman cheering you on, while you whispered sweet nothings to the blacksmith's daughter, ideally with a rose or a slightly concussed sparrow for poetic flair. Waning moons, when the sky rocks shrinking like it's on a crash diet, were a romantic no-go. Start something then, and your love was doomed to fizzle faster than a damp torch. Get rejected under a waning moon. The village astrologer would just shrug and say, "Should have checked the almanac, dummy." It was less about chemistry and more about hoping the cosmos didn't hate your guts. So, as our medieval lovers polish their boots and squint at the sky, let's raise a tankard to their hustle. In a world where romance meant dodging scandal with shoe compliments and begging the moon for a green light, they proved love could conquer all, even if it required a cobbler's bill, a star chart, and a prayer that your crush didn't prefer someone with better laces. If you thought medieval romance was already a cosmic circus with shoe flattery and dead deer deliveries, buckle up for the ultimate love hack, letting the stars dictate your dating life. Forget gut feelings or good vibes. Medieval suitors needed a PhD in astronomy and a knack for dodging angry geese to time their confessions right. Some love gurus dove so deep into star charts they made NASA look like amateurs, turning courtship into a math-heavy, moon-fueled soap opera where one wrong move could tank your love life and your dental hygiene. These starry-eyed advisors warned against popping the question under a full moon unless you were emotionally rock-solid, which ruled out pretty much everyone, since medieval life was basically a 24/7 stress test. Eclipses. Absolute no-go. Unless you wanted your will you marry me to trigger a village-wide catastrophe like crop flops, sick cows, or a sudden turnip shortage. One 14th century monk, clearly a lifelong bachelor, with zero game swore that confessing love under a new moon invited God's wrath, toothaches, and existential crises. Modern folks might raise an eyebrow at the moon to molar link, but back then, it was gospel. When some poor sap tried it and got chomped by a rogue goose, the scribes didn't blame bad animal control. They called it cosmic payback and probably lit a candle for his soul. This wasn't just peasant superstition or idle moon-gazing. Even nobles leaned hard on court astrologers before sending spicy letters planning betrothals or shooting flirty looks over a banquet's third-best mutton. Some lords stalled weddings for months, waiting for Jupiter to stop sulking, basically ghosting their fiancés with a "sorry babe, the planets aren't vibing." It was the medieval equivalent of leaving someone on red, but with star charts and a side of "I consulted the heavens." The astro-romance game birthed a whole job market. Court astrologers weren't just plotting wars or predicting rains, they were the ultimate love coaches juggling lunar phases, planetary tantrums, and noble households' dating schedules. Their charts were so intricate that asking someone to dinner meant cracking open a scroll, doing some quick trigonometry, and praying Venus wasn't in a bad mood. These folks were the medieval Tinder algorithm, but with more parchment and existential dread. Traveling lovers had it rough as starry rules varied by region. A prime flirting window in France might be a romantic death sentence in Germany. Italian city-states had their own celestial hot takes, often clashing with the neighbors' stargazing manuals. Wooing on the road meant mastering local astrolore or hiring a guide who could translate. This moon says love into that moon says you're cursed. It was less about chemistry and more about not accidentally proposing during a star sign snafu. Seasons threw extra chaos into the mix. Spring's starry skies were green lights for new flings unless they clashed with Lent or some saint's feast day that shut down the vibe. Summer was a celestial free-for-all, but you had to dodge harvest duties, political powwows, and the general sweaty mayhem of medieval heat waves. Autumn's stars scream pop the question, but good luck competing with harvest parties' winter prep and everyone's seasonal gloom about the sun ghosting them. Winter brutal. Freezing your toes off to stargaze wasn't romantic, and most folks were too busy not starving to care if Mars was in retrograde. Still, those long nights gave hardcore romantics time to squint at constellations, assuming they didn't lose a finger to frostbite. And let's be real, some sly dogs use the stars as the ultimate dodge. Oh, Beatrice, my heart's all yours, but Saturn's throwing a hissy fit, so we gotta chill. It was the medieval I'm washing my hair, except with more cosmic flair and zero accountability. Blame the planets and you're off the hook. No awkward breakup convo needed. As our medieval lovers huddle under the stars, clutching their almanacs and praying the moon doesn't tank their shot. Let's salute their celestial hustle. In a world where love meant wrestling with math, dodging divine dental curses, and hoping a goose didn't take your confession personally, they proved romance could shine, even if it needed a waxing moon, a solid star chart, and a whole lot of please planets don't screw this up. So you've nailed the shoe compliments, timed your love confessions to the moon's gym schedule, and still your crush is dodging your herb-dusted letters like they're cursed chain mail. Fear not, medieval hopeless romantics had a plan Z. Love potions, the Dark Ages. Answer to Tinder, but with more boiled fingernails and a vibe that screams, I'm one bad decision from a witch trial. These weren't fairy tale brews whipped up by kindly grannies. They were hardcore, sketchy concoctions that made medieval romance look like a chemistry experiment gone rogue. Love potions were the brainchild of herbalists, village-wise women, or that creepy aunt who hoarded jars of something and knew way too much about toxic mushrooms. The recipes. Picture a medieval smoothie from hell, honey basil, and powdered deer heart for that. I'm your soulmate kick because nothing says romance like grinding up Bambi's ticker into date night seasoning. Fancier mixes threw in rose petals and cinnamon for a classy sniff, or wine, because even back then everyone knew booze smoothed out awkward vibes. Then there were the wild ones, ashes of burned hair, anyone. You had to be head over heels to stir someone's scalp. Cremains into their stew, but apparently folks did it like it was just another Tuesday. Getting these potions into your crush was a logistical nightmare. Some were slipped into soup or ale, turning I love you into a stealth mission that looked suspiciously like poisoning, but with heart eyes instead of malice. Others were dabbed on clothes or baked into bread, which worked until your beloved chomped down on a muffin, tasting like regret and gravel. The crazier recipes went full Scooby-Doo graveyard dirt queue, midnight shovel runs, boiled fingernails. Good luck explaining your nail clipping stash, or yup, fat from a black cat. Chill, no cats were harmed. It was probably symbolic, but someone definitely got side-eye for chasing Fluffy with a butter dish. One 12th century gem had you chanting over bread at dawn, then feeding it to your crush without spilling the magical beans. It's like a fairy tale, except instead of true love's kiss, you're dodging food poisoning and hoping they don't notice the bread tastes like a spell book. Success rates lost to history. But the tummy ache stats were probably off the charts. These potions weren't just quirky, they were legit business. Courts dragged potion makers into trials for bewitching nobles, turning love into legal drama wilder than a reality TV reunion. Picture a nobleman whining that enchanted rosemary made him propose with his defense boiling down to the herbs, had me acting unwise. The case of Harold versus the rogue Rosemary set the tone for potion lawsuits proving medieval law was ready to tackle anything, even magical, bad decisions. Spoiler, not every potion was a love magnet. Some just made folks queasy loopy, or worse, obsessed with writing poetry so bad it could clear a tavern. Side effects included rhyming, uncontrollably bursting into song at mass, or compulsively praising everyone's boots, turning you into the village weirdo. But the placebo effect was medieval MVP. If someone thought they were hexed into love, they'd play along, sparking romances built on, is this magic? Or am I just drunk vibes, basically medieval speed dating, with more mysticism and fewer bar tabs? Seasons spiced up the potion game. Spring brews used fresh herbs for max mojo, though the season's natural flirty energy might have done the heavy lifting. Summer potions had to survive the heat, leading to preservation hacks that probably made them taste like pickled regret. Autumn and winter. Good luck sourcing fresh ingredients when everything's dead or frozen, so your love spell smelled like last year's compost and prayed for a miracle. As our medieval lovers stir their dodgy brews, dodging angry geese and nosy priests, let's raise a goblet to their chaotic hustle. In a world where romance meant risking a stomachache, a witch hunt, or a face full of graveyard dirt, they proved love could conquer all, even if it tasted like deer dust, smelled like a bad spell, and came with a side of hope. You're cool with magical felonies. If your medieval crush still isn't swooning over your starry-eyed shoe compliments or nutmeg-dusted love letters and your potion game's more indigestion than infatuation, don't despair. The Middle Ages had a final boss for your romantic saga, love potions, that could make a pharmacist faint, and family approval meetings that felt like brokering peace between rival kingdoms armed with pitchforks and grudges. Buckle up for the wild ride of medieval courtship, where love meant dodging food poisoning and convincing her dad you're not a heretic with a sheep deficit. Autumn love potions leaned hard into harvest vibes, mixing in fresh barley or apples. For that, let's get hitched energy. They often looked less like magic and more like grandma's stew recipe, which probably didn't scream soulmate when served. Winter brews were a sad affair, dried herbs and preserved roots that tasted like medieval cough syrup and had about as much romantic zing as a frostbitten toe. Honestly, you'd have better luck flirting with a turnip. But even if your potion worked and your crush was suddenly reciting sonnets about your poulains, the real gauntlet was winning over her family, a process less like Meet the Parents and more like negotiating a trade deal with a clan that might shank you over a bad goat count. Medieval families didn't care about your dreamy eyes or shared love of loot jams. They wanted hard facts, got sheep, own land that's not currently a battlefield. Still got a tooth or two for chewing stew, not wanted for treason, blasphemy. Or that time you borrowed a neighbor's prize billy goat. These weren't warm fuzzies. They were the medieval equivalent of show me your bank statement and a clean background check. Fib about your livestock, and you're not just dumped. You're dodging annulments, family vendettas, and a visit from the sheep census guy. It was high-stakes romance with a side of hope. You're cool with audits. Families often demanded symbolic gifts to prove you weren't just a smooth-talking chump. Poor suitors brought grain-sturdy cloth or a hand-whittled spoon, humble but practical. Rich guys rolled up with horses, gold, or a whole herd of pigs, maybe tossing in a monk to vouch for their soul's credit score. Want to flex hard. Multiple pigs and a cleric's glowing review, but screw up the gift and you're toast. One chicken when they expected sheep. That's a breakup and a village meme. Jewelry when they need plow parts. Congrats, you've just screamed, I don't get your vibe louder than a banshee. In villages, approval could be less formal but just as brutal. Dads judged you by your handshake grip boot quality or how well you could brawl over a fence line without breaking a neck. Moms were sneakier, putting you through social boot camp, watching you pray eat, or handle a barn fire to see if you're a keeper or a klutz. One mom only greenlit suitors who could churn butter, like pros turning courtship into a dairy Olympics. Fail her lactose test, and you're back to serenading goats. Even family approval wasn't the finish line. Marriages were like signing a merger with your crush's whole clan, complete with economic stakes and feuds that made Game of Thrones look chill. You weren't just proposing, you were pitching to join their farm, co-op trade network, and ongoing beef with the McTavish clan over that stolen cow from 1297. Negotiations dragged on for months, hashing out land rights inheritance, and who fights off the rival lord's goons' clauses. It was less I do and more I do, but let's talk mutual defense pacts and grazing rights first. Say goodbye to the dainty dance of medieval love letters, and hello to the rip-roaring axe-swinging world of the Norse, where death wasn't a snooze, but the ultimate glow-up into a cosmic fight club. In the fog-drenched fjords of Scandinavia, under skies lit by the aurora borealis's neon raves, the Vikings saw kicking the bucket as a job promotion, ideally to a gig involving epic brawls, endless feasts, and prepping for Ragnarok, a showdown so wild it made medieval family squabbles look like a polite spat over who gets the last turnip. Buckle up for a Viking afterlife that's less eternal rest and more eternal wrestling match with mead chasers. For the Norse, death was like switching careers to become a full-time action hero. Their afterlife wasn't fluffy clouds and harps, it was a training camp for the apocalypse with multiple destinations like a supernatural travel agency. The VIP spot, Valhalla Erekr, the Bold's gold-roofed man cave, basically the universe's rowdiest frat house, for warriors who died swinging. To get in, you had to check out with a sword in hand, guts full of grit, and a body count that'd make a saga writer swoon. This made dying gloriously the ultimate flex, because the alternative was a lot less punchy. The Valkyries Erekr's badass headhunters handled Valhalla's guest list. These weren't your grandma's angels, they were fierce warrior ladies on 8-legged horses swooping onto battlefields like cosmic HR reps with a knack for spotting talent. Picture the aftermath of a bloody clash, smoke curling the air, thick with salt and iron, and these divine recruiters rolling in to eyeball the carnage. No resumes or where do you see yourself in 5 years, just a quick check of how epically you ate it in battle. Slay and slay your Valhalla bound, trip over your own axe. Better luck, next life. But Valhalla wasn't the only hot ticket. Astrid sighed Kona. The goddess, who saw no difference between smooching and swordplay, snagged half the battle dead for her pad Folkvanger. It was like a divine timeshare for heroes, though nobody's sure how she and Erekr divvied up the talent, maybe a coin toss or a godly arm wrestle. Less glamorous was Helheim Grim, the Dark's domain, where folks who died of boring stuff like old age or a bad cold ended up. It wasn't torture, just the afterlife equivalent of an eternal DMV Weight Zero mead, all monotony. This afterlife pecking order turned Norse life into a high-stakes game of die awesome or bust. Forget living to 90 with a cozy hearth. Vikings planned their exits like Oscar-worthy stunts to impress the Valkyries. It was like grinding your whole life for a dream job, except the interview was getting hacked to bits in a way that screamed, "Hire me." Warriors didn't just pack swords for fights. They were spiritual 401ks, ensuring they'd look cool when the Valkyries clocked in. Some even rehearsed signature moves, think Viking TikTok, but with more blood and zero filters. The Norse treated death like a road trip, needing serious prep less, pack a sweater, and more pack every axe you own. Their afterlife wasn't a chill retirement, it was boot camp for Ragnarok, the cosmic cage match to end all existence. Valhalla's Einherjar spent their days sparring in brutal, no consequences brawls. Being dead meant no pesky injuries, then partied like it was their last night before the world's final boss fight. It was like CrossFit meets an open bar forever. Valhalla's daily grind was a mix of Navy SEALs and Animal House. Mornings full-contact death matches to hone your Ragnarok game with zero stakes since you're already toast. Evenings epic feasts with bottomless mead, poured by Valkyrie, and meat from Sahrimnir, a magical boar that got butchered daily, but bounced back like a meaty phoenix. Sustainable, sure, Exhausting. Try keeping up with eternal cardio and keg stands while prepping for the apocalypse. This setup was pure Norse catnip part, warrior gym part, legendary rager. Valhalla wasn't just a reward, it was the ultimate networking event with history's toughest heroes all training for the day they'd storm Ragnarok like the universe's most jacked up flash mob. It blended grit, glory, and good times, proving the Vikings didn't just live hard. They died harder with a side of pass the mead, and let's do this again tomorrow. So as the Norse afterlife hums with clashing steel and clinking horns, let's raise a tankard to these wild souls who turned death into the ultimate adventure. In a world where checking out meant checking into a cosmic fight club, they proved you could go out swinging and still have time for a feast that'd make Valhalla's guest list jealous. While medieval Christians were busy polishing their halos and confessing every stray thought to avoid eternal detention, the Norse were out here treating death like signing up for the universe's most intense boot camp. Forget soul cleansing or napping in paradise. The Vikings were all about bulking up their battle skills and schmoozing with the afterlife's toughest brawlers to prep for Ragnarok, the cosmic cage match that'd make medieval dowry disputes look like a tea party. Welcome to the Norse way of life and death, where courage, swordplay, and bro loyalty were your ticket to an eternal fight fest against world-eating monsters. Norse heroes didn't just need guts, they had to be the kind of reliable wingman you'd want in a never-ending supernatural slugfest. It wasn't enough to swing an axe like a champ. You had to prove you'd have your buddies back when facing down a fire-breathing serpent bent on cosmic destruction. Think less lone wolf and more ultimate team player who doesn't flake when the apocalypse RSVP drops. Now for a bunch of beardy warriors, the Norse were shockingly chill about gender roles in the afterlife game. While other cultures handed men the spiritual keys, the Norse gave major props to women like the Valkyries, badass battle babes who'd yeet you into Valhalla, or leave you crying in the dirt, and goddesses like Astrid-side Kona, who ran her own warrior Airbnb called Folkvanger. Astrid wasn't just Eriker's sidekick, she had her own recruitment squad splitting the heroic dead like a divine draft pick. This was equal opportunity eternity Viking style. Women could also snag a spot in the afterlife VIP list by dying heroically, though the rulebook was fuzzier than a berserker's beard. Shield maidens, who threw down in battle, might score Valhalla or Folkvanger passes, but since no scholar was dumb enough to take notes mid-battle, we're stuck piecing it together from old bones and sagas. Either way, Norse ladies had a shot at eternal glory, which was more than most cultures offered their gals. Norse funeral vibes were less rest in peace and more gear up for round 2. While other folks were purifying souls or prepping for Judgment Day, Vikings were kitting out their dead like they were headed to a cosmic Coachella with a side of carnage. Graves came stocked with swords, shields, and maybe a snack for the road because you don't show up to Valhalla empty-handed or hangry. It was less about eternal chill and more about ensuring you're ready to party and punch in the next realm. The Norse tied their afterlife hype to their brutal northern winters, where surviving meant being tough as nails and tight with your crew. Ragnarok. The ultimate frost-fueled showdown was the Super Bowl of their values. Every sword swing and shield bash in life was practice for the day they'd face off against chaos itself. It was like training your whole life for a snowball fight that'd decide the fate of reality. As icy winds scream through the fjords and the aurora borealis flickers like a divine neon sign, you can almost hear Valhalla's golden roof rattling with the clank of practice fights and the clink of mead horns. Here's to the Norse, who lived, loved, and died with one goal to go out so epic they'd earn a fist bump from the gods and a front row seat to the end of the world, preferably with a tankard in hand and a battle cry ready. Say adios to the medieval mush of love potions and starry-eyed sonnets and strap in for the Norse way of checking out a send-off, so extra, it makes Viking raids look like a casual grocery run. In the fog-choked fjords where the aurora borealis throws cosmic raves, death wasn't a snooze, but the ultimate road trip, and the Norse packed for it like they were auditioning for Valhalla's VIP list. Forget quiet graves. We're talking flaming ships and cosmic cruises that'd give modern party planners a heart attack. Welcome to Norse funerals, where death was less rest in peace and more sail into eternity with a sword and a snack. To Vikings, ships weren't just for pillaging monasteries or what they called spicy trade deals. They were holy Ubers ferrying souls across the 9 realms, like cosmic carpool lanes. When a big shot Jarl warrior or badass shield maiden kicked the bucket, their funeral wasn't a quick dirt nap. It was a maritime extravaganza that screamed, "I'm off to party with Erikr, and I'm taking my longship." These folks didn't just die, they launched into the afterlife like they were headlining a saga. For the elite ship, burials were logistical nightmares that'd make Coachella look like a backyard BBQ. Coastal clans, especially in Norway's fjords or Sweden's island mazes, dug massive ship-shaped trenches, think giant dirt boats, to cradle real longships, some stretching over 70 feet. These weren't coffins. They were cosmic yachts loaded with enough gear to make an inter-realm adventurer jealous. The deceased got prime hull real estate, surrounded by swords, shields, and armor for afterlife brawls, plus food pots and bling to flex their status in Valhalla's social scene. But the Norse didn't stop at packing a warrior's go-bag. Some graves included sacrificed animals, horses for rides, dogs for cuddles, and hawks for that extra flair. These weren't random pets. They were handpicked for symbolic swagger and supernatural Uber duties. And yeah, things got dark. Some high rollers had slaves or servants killed to tag along, proving Viking VIPs took their entourage game to grim extremes. It was less rest in peace, and more bring the whole squad to eternity, reflecting a culture where your afterlife crew was as vital as your earthly one. Prep for these burials was a village-wide production, like planning a royal wedding with more corpses and fewer cake tastings. The deceased got a full spa day, washed, decked out in their Sunday best, sometimes even slathered with makeup or masks to look fresh for their godly meet and greet. Women, often priestesses or wise grannies with PhDs in death vibes, ran the show, juggling body prep, grave swag, and spiritual protocols to ensure the dead didn't fumble their Valhalla audition. The funeral itself. Pure spectacle part, church service, part kegger part, Viking Coachella. Whole villages showed up to eat, drink, and swap epic tales about the deceased turning the goodbye into a multi-day rager. Once the ship was loaded with the VIP, their loot, and any 4-legged or unfortunate 2-legged plus ones, it was buried under dirt stones and turf, creating massive mounds called ship tumuli. These weren't just graves, they were eternal billboards shouting, "Legends were here." Archaeologists later hit the jackpot with finds like the Oseberg and Gokstad ships, pristine time capsules of Norse flexing. But for the real drama queens, nothing beat the flaming ship send-off. Less common, but iconic. These coastal clans shoved a loaded boat into the sea, doused it with tar, and lit it up like a Viking 4th of July. The blaze purified the soul, torched the ship to keep it exclusive, and gave everyone a fiery show that screamed, "This guy was a big deal." Logistics were a nightmare, right? Tide enough pitch to burn and winds that wouldn't yeet the flaming wreck back at the mourners. It took priestly know-how and sailor skills to pull off without setting the village on fire. These pyrotechnic exits were reserved for A-listers who died epically or lived large. The sight of a ship blazing against the northern waves was a tearjerker, and a flex etching the deceased into saga-level memory. But let's be real, flaming longships weren't cheap. Only kings, jarls, or merchants with dragon-sized bank accounts could afford such insta-worthy exits. Regular Joes got simpler burials with a sword or two, but the vibe stayed the same. Death was a launch pad, not a finish line. Ships were the Norse soul's GPS, tying their love of exploration to the great beyond. Just as Vikings sailed to raid trade or discover new lands, their dead cruised the cosmos to new realms, ready to network with afterlife legends. It was a love letter to adventure courage and the belief that even death was just another epic voyage, preferably with a killer playlist and a fully stocked bar. As the northern winds howl and the aurora flickers like a divine Snapchat filter, let's raise a horn to the Norse who turned funerals into cosmic road trips. In a world where death meant sailing into eternity with swagger, they proved you could go out blazing literally and still have time to RSVP for Ragnarok's afterparty. Building a Viking funeral ship wasn't just slapping together some planks and calling it a day. It was a high-stakes gig for master craftsmen who had to nail both seaworthy engineering and afterlife aesthetics. These weren't hand-me-down raiding boats or fishing skiffs. They were bespoke cosmic cruisers pimped out for a one-way trip to Valhalla's VIP lot. Picture a medieval shipyard where the crew's muttering about keel strength and whether the carvings scream, "Eriker's gonna love this." It was boat building with a side of spiritual swagger, ensuring the deceased sailed into eternity, looking like a Norse rock star. Timing these send-offs was trickier than planning a Viking raid during a blizzard. Summer was the sweet spot, sunny skies, chill vibes, and easy hauling of heavy, grave swag like sword shields, and that one guy's prized ale horn collection. Everybody could show up, feast, and cry without slipping on ice or losing a toe to frostbite. Winter funerals, a logistical dumpster fire. You'd prep indoors praying the corpse didn't get too ripe, then wait for spring to yeet the ship into its mound or set it ablaze. It was like scheduling a Coachella set, but with more snow and existential dread. Not every Norse clan did ship burials the same way local flair turned each funeral into a regional remix. Norway's fjord folks went hard with deep dramatic trenches for their longships, like parking a cosmic Ferrari in a custom garage. Sweden's island crews leaned into compact artsy mounds, flexing their archipelago chic. Denmark's coastal squads had their own spin, maybe tossing in some Baltic trade bling to spice up the grave. Same core vibe. Death's a journey, pack your bags, but with enough local spice to keep archaeologists arguing over whose boat was bougiest. These buried ships are time capsules that spill the tea on Viking life better than any saga scribbled by a mead-drunk poet. Each find like the Oseberg's fancy woodwork or Gokstad's beefy hull dishes, dirt on who had cash, who traded with far-off lands, and who believed a cosmic road trip needed a fully stocked minibar. They're snapshots of a society where status craftsmanship and I'm ready for Ragnarok energy shaped everything from your axe to your afterlife Airbnb. As waves slap against wooden hulls and the air hums with pine tar and smoky pitch, you can almost see these epic ships vanishing into the northern fog, loaded with warriors' loot and dreams of Valhalla's open bar. Here's to the Norse who turned death into the ultimate cruise sails, up swords, out, and ready to roll into eternity with a battle cry and a killer playlist. Let's ditch the Norse pyrotechnics and Viking fight clubs for a slicker, sneakier vibe in medieval Venice, where canals shimmered like liquid jade and the air was thick with spice salt and secrets. Forget cosmic voyages or eternal brawls. Here transformation meant slipping on a mask and becoming someone else without ever leaving the lagoon. In this glittering maze of intrigue, masks weren't just party props, they were ninja-level identity hacks for a city where everyone was spying, scheming, and way too nosy about your business. Welcome to Venetian Carnival, where anonymity was the ultimate flex, and social rules got tossed like a bad gondola paddle. By the 13th century, Venice was the medieval equivalent of Wall Street, with worse plumbing and actual pirates. Merchant dynasties ran trade routes from foggy London to sun-baked Constantinople, raking in cash, and cultural chaos that made the city a hotbed of ambition and backstabbing. With wealth came paranoia, your family's rep, your shady deals, and that one time you overpaid for saffron could make or break you. Enter the mask not as a cute costume, but as a social superpower, letting you dodge the gossip mill and snoop without getting snitched on. A 1268 law tried to ban masked gambling, proving two things: Venetians were masking up early, and they were already using their disguise game for sketchy side hustles. Masks were the ultimate cheat code in a city where your face was your LinkedIn profile. Behind one, a merchant's kid could flirt with a duke's daughter, a noblewoman could sneak into the dodgy part of town, or a priest could hit up a dice game without his flock clutching their rosaries. It was like medieval incognito mode, zero accountability, maximum vibes. But masks hit peak chaos during Carnival, the pre-Lent bash, where Venice turned into a citywide rave and social norms got yeeted into the Grand Canal. For a few glorious weeks, the city's rigid pecking order melted into a glittery mess of silk sin. And don't tell my bishop I was here. Carnival was Venice's annual. Let it all hang out past a pressure valve for a society tighter than a corset. The streets buzzed with music cackles and the swish of fancy threads. Though the clink of coins never stopped, Venetians didn't pause deal-making even when dressed like peacocks. The star of this masquerade was the bauta, a mask so creepy it could spook a gargoyle. Stark white, blank as a bad poker face, with a jutting chin that let you munch, sip, and spill tea without unmasking. Paired with a black tabaro cloak and tricorn hat, it turned you into a suave, slightly sinister ghost who could crash any party or plot a coup without anyone clocking your ID. The bauta wasn't about looking cute, it was built for business. Its weird beak shape kept your mouth free for chatting, or chowing down perfect for deal-making or flirting, while staying fully anonymous. Talking to a bauta wearer was like debating a fancy phantom who might be your cousin, your creditor, or the doge himself. It gave zero hints about their mood, making every chat a thrilling game of are we vibing, or am I about to get shanked? Spooky. Sure. Irresistible. Absolutely. Here's the wild part, the bauta wasn't just a carnival toy, it was required for some government gigs, voting state ceremonies, or sketchy council meetings. Slap on a bauta to keep things fair. The idea was to level the playing field. Nobles, merchants, or shady randos all looked the same behind that blank stare. It was Venice's stab at democracy via disguise, like running a government through a costume party. Did it stop corruption? Nah, masks just made it easier to whisper bribes or plot betrayals without anyone pointing fingers. Politics became a high-stakes masquerade where nobody knew who was rigging the game, but everyone was playing dirty. Venice's love-hate affair with masks mirrored its whole deal, a city preaching fairness and trade while running on family cliques, secret handshakes, and a spy network that'd make the CIA jealous. Masks let Venetians slip their social leashes, dodging the roles that boxed them in. They were freedom danger and a chance to be anyone, until Lent rolled around and you had to confess it all to a priest who'd probably been masked up at the same dice game. As the canals reflect Byzantine domes and the air hums with spice and sea salt, let's raise a goblet to the Venetians who turned identity into a game of hide and seek. In a city where secrets were currency and masks were magic, they proved you could live a double life, swirling through silk and shadows, all while keeping your name out of the Doge's naughty list. In the glittering gossip fest that was medieval Venice, the Council of Ten Think, the city's shadowy boardroom bosses wielded anonymity like a double-edged sword. These masked masterminds ran meetings in bauta masks to keep things impartial. But let's be real. They also used that faceless power to yeet rivals' rig trade deals and keep the city's cash flowing to the right families. It was like running a mafia with better cloaks and zero name tags, turning politics into a creepy costume party where everyone's a suspect. The bauta's vibe wasn't just for shady council plots, it was a psychological joyride for regular Venetians itching to break free from their social cages. Behind that blank, spooky mask, a mousy merchant could channel his inner Casanova, a cloistered noblewoman could strut through sketchy alleys, and a priest could sneak into a tavern without his flock clutching their prayer beads. It was like a medieval personality swap, letting you test drive a bolder you without tanking your family's rep or landing in a confessional. Carnival cranked this chaos to 11. For a few wild weeks, Venice became a masked free-for-all where normal rules got tossed into the canal. Flirting deal-making, or just vibing with strangers behind identical masks. No social math needed, just pure anonymous adrenaline. Romances sparked friendships formed, and shady contracts got inked in a haze of, who even are you? It was like Tinder, but with silk robes and a side of hope. You're not my cousin. Crafting a top-tier bauta was no Etsy side hustle. It was high art for the masquerari. Or Venice's guild of mask-making wizards. These folks weren't churning out Halloween props. They were forging social shapeshifters. A killer bauta had to be comfy for all-day scheming, tough enough for rowdy carnival brawls, and sneaky enough to keep your face a secret, even when your ex is squinting at you from 2 feet away. It was like designing a superhero suit for a city where the superpower was dodging gossip. Venice's trade hub swagger shone in every bauta. North African leather, fancy Italian paper, and bling from across the Mediterranean turned masks into mini billboards of the city's global flex. Each one screamed, "We're rich cultured and probably overcharging you for spices." Rich folks splurged on luxe masks with subtle gold flecks or velvet trim to whisper, "I'm loaded," without blowing their cover. Middle-class Venetians snagged solid, budget-friendly versions, think medieval Zara. The working stiffs DIY'd their bautas or grabbed bare-bones models that hid their face, but didn't scream, "I own a yacht." Bauta season ebbed and flowed with Venice's tug-of-war between party vibes and priestly side-eye. Carnival was the official mask-up pass, but big shots rocked bautas year-round for hush-hush deals, sneaky hookups, or dodging their in-laws. It was the ultimate tool for juggling your saintly public image with your "I'm plotting something" private life. For women, the bauta was a game-changer. Normally stuck under family watch, noble gals could slip on a mask and crash political powwows, eavesdrop on trade talks, or debate philosophy with dudes who'd usually scoff. It was feminism via disguise, letting them roam free behind a creepy white facade. Venice's mask mania went viral, baffling and thrilling foreigners. Visiting diplomats clueless about the no face, no problem rules sparked international drama by whining that masked chats were shady or swooning over the theatrical thrill. Some thought it was Deception City. Others wanted to import the vibe to their own courts. The church, though, wasn't amused. Priests fretted that masks greenlit sin lies, and Lent defying shenanigans, sparking a centuries-long tug-of-war between "let's party" and "you're all going to hell." Venice just shrugged and kept masking up. As dusk drapes Venice's canals in shadow, and ancient stones hum with the ghosts of masked giggles and whispered plots, you can almost hear the click of boots as faceless figures slink toward secret rendezvous. Here's to the Venetians who turned life into a masquerade marathon, slipping through intrigue and revelry, proving you could be anyone, do anything, and still dodge the Doge's snitches with a wink and a blank stare. While the bauta was Venice's go-to for political plots and anonymous banter, a weirder, wilder mask was shaking up the city's girl power game in the shadowy courtyards of palazzos and the hushed halls of convents. Meet the Moretta, a black velvet facehugger that gave women a ninja-level social hack by zipping their lips tighter than a nun's vow. This mask was the ultimate paradox, a ticket to freedom that came with a gag order, turning ladies into silent superstars in a city where opening your mouth could tank your rep. Strap in for the Moretta, where empowerment met awkward dentistry in medieval Venice's masquerade mania. The Moretta wasn't your average carnival bling. It was a sleek, oval-shaped slab of black velvet that swallowed your face whole, looking like a cross between high fashion and a haunted painting. Forget straps or ribbons. This bad boy stayed put with a genius-level gimmick, a button inside that you clenched between your teeth like a pirate gripping a dagger. One slip, say, to giggle, gasp, or yell gondola. Traffic sucks and whoosh, the mask drops. Your cover's blown and everyone knows you're the Duke's cousin who shouldn't be at this dice game. It was voluntary mute mode, turning you into a walking enigma who couldn't even order a spritz. This enforced silence wasn't just quirky, it was a social earthquake. In a city where women's voices were already on a short leash, the Moretta flipped the script by making not talking a superpower. Picture a noblewoman gliding through a palazzo bash, loot jams and candle fumes in the air, her Moretta turning heads like a silent movie star. Nobody knows her deal. Is she judging, flirting, planning a coup? Her mute mystique outshines any witty one-liner, making her the talk of the party without saying a peep. It was like weaponizing introversion in a world that wouldn't shut up. For high-class Venetian gals, the Moretta was a golden ticket to places their chaperones would have nixed. Political powwows. Check, shady trade deals. Yep, that sketchy tavern with the good minstrels. Oh, you bet. The mask kept their honor intact while letting them snoop scheme or just vibe without their family's gossip radar pinging. Nuns loved it too, rocking Morettas to handle convent biz, buying candles, dodging worldly drama while staying pure as a saint's Instagram. Even courtesans, Venice's social tightrope walkers, used it to mingle with bigwigs incognito, sidestepping the usual, oh, it's her side-eye. But the Moretta's mute mandate was a double-edged sword. Sure, you could crash any scene, but you couldn't chime in, clap back, or even ask where the bathroom was. It was freedom with a catch, like getting VIP access to a concert, but being duct-taped to a chair. This mirrored Venice's whole deal with women the city's trade boom. Let ladies stack cash and clout, but old-school rules kept their mouths shut in public. The Moretta was a velvet-wrapped paradox, smashing some barriers while screaming, shh, don't ruin it. Crafting a Moretta was no weekend DIY, it was a high-stakes art for the masquerari Venice's mask-making MVPs. These masks had to be light enough for all-night intrigue, sturdy enough to survive a sweaty ball, and snug enough to fool your nosiest aunt up close. That tooth-button precision engineering to keep it secure without wrecking your smile or your breathing. Top-tier Morettas used primo imported velvet silk linings and subtle bling-think tiny pearls or silver threads to look classy without shouting, I'm secretly the Doge's niece. It was like building a stealth jet for your face. Moretta wearers became nonverbal ninjas mastering a sign language of sass. A head tilt said, go on, I'm listening. Hand placement screamed, I'm bored, or you're cute. The way you swished your skirt could start or end a feud. It was silent, shade-throwing, perfected, Imogene Mean Girls, but with zero dialogue and fancier gowns. These women turned mute into a mood, owning rooms without a single word. As twilight cloaks Venice's canals and ancient stones hum with centuries of silent secrets, you can almost spot a Moretta-clad figure slinking through the shadows, button clenched, plotting her next move. Here's to the Venetian ladies who turned silence into a superpower, navigating a city of spies and snitches with nothing but velvet grit and a killer head tilt, proving you could rule the scene without saying a damn thing. In the velvet-clad chaos of medieval Venice, the Moretta mask didn't just zip women's lips. It birthed a silent social scene where mute mavens ruled with a flick of a wrist or a sassy head tilt. Pro-Moretta wearers became legends, strutting through parties like ninja ballerinas, their wordless swagger earning them street cred as the queens of quiet cool. These gals built whole personas on their masked mystique, turning silence into a social mic drop that had everyone whispering, who is that? It was like being a celebrity influencer, but with zero tweets and all vibes. The Moretta's role shifted with Venice's party calendar. During holy festivals, it let women join the street sermons and saintly shindigs while keeping their modesty tighter than a nun's wimple. Come. Carnival. Though it was game on, ladies could dive into the wilder side of Venice's masked madness, sneaking into dice dens or flirting with strangers, all while biting that button like their life, or at least their rep, depended on it. It was freedom, but with a side of don't sneeze or you're busted. Foreigners lost their minds over the Moretta cementing Venice's rep as the capital of fancy weirdness. Visitors gawked at these silent velvet-faced divas gliding through galas, some swooning over the chic enigma, others creeped out by what felt like a feminist mute button. To some, it was high-class sorcery. To others, it was like chatting with a gorgeous ghost who'd ghost you mid-sentence. Either way, Venice's Moretta mania had tourists buzzing and probably botching the local mask etiquette left and right. Venetian artists and writers went nuts for the Moretta, splashing it across canvases and pages like it was the ultimate it girl. Painters turned masked women into icons of who's that lady, allure their black velvet faces screaming sophistication and secrets. Writers spun tales of Moretta wearing heroines using their silence to riff on power identity and how to own a room without saying a word. It was like the Moretta was Venice's muse, inspiring a cultural glow-up that screamed less, talk more mystique. The Moretta's influence didn't stop at Venice's canals. It left a lipstick mark on Europe's mask game and theater scene. Its silent femme fatale energy shaped how folks thought about women's power anonymity and strutting your stuff without spilling your tea. It was like the Moretta invented the art of the subtle flex whispering to future generations, "You don't need a megaphone to slay." From stage dramas to Renaissance social experiments, the Moretta's legacy was the ultimate quiet storm. But as the Renaissance rolled on and women started getting more mic time, the Moretta's mute mandate lost its shine. Why chomp a button when you could just say what's on your mind? Plus, fashion moved on. Those velvet ovals started looking like last season's poulains. Venice itself was shifting too. As the Republic's trade empire wobbled, the cloak and dagger vibes that birthed the Moretta felt less urgent. The mask went from must-have to museum piece, a relic of a time when silence was a gal's best wingman. Still, the Moretta's ghost lingers in Europe's cultural DNA, a symbol of sneaky feminine power and the art of saying everything by saying nothing. Its creepy cool look and button-biting gimmick made it a standout in mask history, like the Mona Lisa of mute mystique. It's the ultimate reminder that in Venice's heyday, women could run the show without ever opening their mouths. As Venice's canals twinkle under the stars and ancient stones hum with centuries of silent sass, you can almost feel the Moretta's velvet shadow button clenched ready to steal the spotlight. Here's to the masked mavens who turned quiet into clout, proving you could conquer a city of spies and snitches with just a head tilt and a whole lot of hush. As we wind down our wild romp through history's shadiest corners, from medieval eye-flirting to Viking ship BBQs, from herb-soaked love letters to Venice's mute mask mavens, let's cap it off with the dramatic demise and phoenix-like comeback of Venetian mask culture. This tale's got it all: political meltdowns, a French buzzkill named Napoleon, and a 20th century glow-up that turned Venice's sneaky face hiders into global party icons. Buckle up for the saga of how Venice's masks got canceled, then clawed their way back to immortality like a sequined superhero. By the late 18th century, Venice's mask game, that glorious mix of anonymity, intrigue, and who's that under the velvet, was teetering like a gondola in a storm. The Republic's golden days of trade empires and secret handshakes were crumbling under New World vibes, power shifts, and one pint-sized French general with a big ego and zero chill for Italian shenanigans. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte in 1797, storming in like a military Marie Kondo, ready to reorganize Venice's millennium of independence into something that sparked joy for him, not the Venetians. Napoleon's crew looked at Carnival's masked madness and saw a giant red flag. To them, those Bautas and Morettas weren't chic social hacks. They were rebel starter kits perfect for plotting coups or dodging tax collectors. What Venetians called sophisticated fun, the French called administrative nightmare. So with the precision of a guillotine, they banned Carnival outright. No tweaks, no compromises, just a big fat non to the whole shebang. Masks illegal unless you were hamming it up in a state-approved play or some stuffy government gig. Overnight, Venice's streets went from a glittery free-for-all to a grim parade of French boots and locals muttering, "I miss my creepy white face." The masquerari Venice's mask-making rock stars, got hit hard. These artisans who'd spent generations perfecting the art of hiding your face in style were suddenly jobless and borderline criminal. Some pivoted to making props for the few theaters Napoleon didn't hate. Others vanished into the fog, their velvet wizardry lost to history, or maybe a quiet gig in Milan. It was like watching a whole industry of Instagram filter creators get yeeted into obscurity. This wasn't just a fashion flop, it was the death of a social superpower. Masks had let Venetians dodge class traps, try on new personas, and navigate a city where one wrong move could tank your family's spice trade. Without them, Venice's vibe shifted from "who's that mysterious hottie" to "better not sneeze near a French soldier." The city's soul took a hit like a masquerade ball with the lights turned on and the DJ arrested. The 19th century didn't help. Austrians, then Italians, rolled in with their own takes on Venice's quirks, but nobody was keen to revive the mask mayhem. Carnival shriveled into sad house parties or watered-down stage shows that felt like cosplay without the heart. For nearly 2 centuries, Venice's masks snoozed in dusty museum cases, old paintings, and grandma's tales of back when we could be anyone for a night. It was like the city's wildest era got locked in a time capsule waiting for a comeback. But humans are stubborn, and our itch to play pretend doesn't just vanish because some general says no capes. In 1979, Venice said, "Screw it, let's party," and brought back Carnival with a vengeance. Masks returned like a fabulous zombie apocalypse, but with a modern twist. Think less sneaky political plot and more Instagrammable tourist magnet. Backed by cultural crews, global sponsors, and event planners who'd make medieval Venetians jealous, the new Carnival turned the city into a glitter-dusted theater. Canals sparkled palazzos through epic balls, and streets swarmed with masked revelers from Tokyo to Timbuktu, all chasing that sweet, sweet vibe of being someone else for a night. This wasn't the OG mask scene, though. Modern Carnival was a remix part, historical cosplay part, tourism cash cow, shaped by a world where anonymity's less about dodging spies and more about epic selfies. Still, it tapped into that timeless human craving to slip your skin and strut as a mystery. Venice's masks, once crushed by Napoleon's boot, rose again, proving you can't keep a good disguise down. As the lagoon glows under starlight and echoes of masked laughter fade, let's toast the Venetians who turned faces into freedom. From the ashes of empire, their masks danced back, reminding us that the urge to be someone else, whether for love rebellion or just a killer party, never dies even when a French guy tries to cancel it. As we wrap our whirlwind tour through history's wildest corners, from medieval side-eye seduction to Viking boat bonfires, from herb-drenched love notes to Venice's sneaky mask mayhem, let's zoom in on the modern makeover of Venetian masks and the eternal human itch to be someone else. These days, masks aren't for dodging spies or scandal. They're glitzy props for tourists, art nerds, and anyone chasing that sweet Instagram flex. But beneath the feathers and bling, they still whisper the same old magic, the chance to slip your skin and strut as a mystery. Buckle up for the finale, where Venice's masks go from social ninja gear to cultural glow-up, proving humans never stop craving a little transformation. The reborn Venetian Carnival of 1979 wasn't the cloak and dagger rager of old. It was a glossy love letter to the past, spruced up for modern wallets and camera rolls. Masks ditched their old gigs as anonymity shields and became showstoppers decked out with peacock feathers, gold leaf, and enough jewels to make a medieval masquerade faint. Forget practical stuff like, can I sip wine without unmasking, or will this survive a Canal Street brawl? These babies are all about looking extra for the gram. The Masquerade Guild got a reboot, but instead of crafting social superpowers, they're churning out decorative dazzlers, more museum bait than secret agent kit. Today's carnival is less a living vibe and more a nostalgic theme park packed with tourists who outnumber locals like seagulls at a fish market. Masks aren't tools for Venetians to sneak into shady deals or flirt incognito. They're souvenirs screaming, I went to Venice and all I got was this bedazzled face. For outsiders, they're the ultimate Venetian vibe. Check, a slice of history you can selfie with. For locals, it's a bittersweet nod to when masks meant power, not just a photo op by the Rialto Bridge. But here's the kicker, even in our oversharing TikTok-obsessed world, masks still pack a punch. That urge to ghost your 9-to-5 self, slip on a disguise, and play pretend. It's as old as dirt and twice as stubborn. Modern carnival might be a tourist trap with better lighting, but it still delivers that tingle of what if I'm a pirate queen for a day? It's not the medieval free-for-all where you could plot a coup over Prosecco, but it's close enough to make you wonder who you'd be if nobody was watching. These new masks aren't clones of their sneaky ancestors. They're remixes shaped by time tourism and a world where anonymity means turning off your location tags. Like Venice itself, they've pivoted, survived, and found new ways to dazzle, carrying that old-school spark of mystery into a selfie stick era. They're proof that humans will always chase the thrill of reinvention, whether it's via a velvet Moretta or a glitter-crusted tourist trinket. As we tie a bow on this journey from courtly love's sweaty palm reading to Norse afterlife ragers from Venice's silent mask queens, to today's feathered photo props, let's see the thread humans are obsessed with busting out of their boring boxes. Whether it's moonlit poetry, a flaming longship, or a bauda, ma hiding your shady side, we've always hunted for ways to be more, to touch the sparkly stuff beyond the daily grind. Medieval suitors, Viking warriors, Venetian schemers, they all chase the same dream to be bigger than their to-do lists. In our world of non-stop notifications and facial recognition, these old tales hit harder. They remind us there's power in secrets magic, in makeovers, and straight-up wizardry in slapping on a mask to be your wildest self, even for a hot second. So, as you drift off tonight, let your dreams swirl with silk, rustles, herb whiffs, church bell clangs, and the chance that tomorrow you'll wake up just a smidge more mysterious than you were today. Sleep tight, you legends, and may your snooze be stuffed with whispers of forgotten sagas and the eternal buzz of becoming whoever you damn well please. Catch you next time in the land of lost tales and sneaky histories. Good night.